I want to talk a little bit about police officers, because our party, the New Democrats, have been calling for the last 3 elections for the increase of 2,500 police officers in this country, because we do believe that putting police officers on Canadian streets in and using them properly, in my view, that means putting them into our communities, having police officers on bikes, putting them around high crime areas like SkyTrain stations in my city of Vancouver, is an important way that we can improve community safety. And the Conservative Party promised to create 2,500 police officers in the 2008 election. Now, I have met with police boards across this country. I have met with police chiefs across this country, and they all tell me the same thing, that only a fraction of those 2,500 police officers have been created. And the reason why is because the money that the federal government promised to give the jurisdictions to create those officers has been reduced from ongoing funding to 5-year funding to 3-year funding. And police chiefs have looked me in the eye and said, we're not creating a single police position when I only have funding for 3 years. There's no funding for the civilian staff that each police position engenders. The money has been transferred to provinces with no strings attached. So provinces have received that money without any obligation to actually create the police officers, and in some cases, that money or portions of that money have disappeared into provincial treasuries' general revenue. So we have not, the Conservatives have not fulfilled their promise to Canadians to create those 2,500 police officers, and I would encourage them to do so because they get unanimity on this side of the House in doing that. We also need, if we really want to improve our justice system and reduce crime on our streets, is we need to add more prosecutors and judges in this country. Our courts are overburdened. There are cases that are kicked out of court across this country every day for want of prosecution and delay. Now, I see nothing in Bill C-10 that adds a police officer, nothing in Bill C-10 that adds a judge, nothing in Bill C-10 that adds a prosecutor, and nothing in Bill C-10, not one thing that addresses addiction. There's nothing in Bill C-10 that addresses mental illness. There's nothing in Bill C-10 that addresses crime prevention. I think those are valid, fact-based criticisms of this bill. I'll tell you what I have also seen in our federal prison system. There was a program called CORCAN, which was a program in our federal institutions that had inmates learn skilled trades and skilled work and engage in programs like making furniture for the federal government, that they would then sell that furniture to the federal government who needed that furniture at reduced prices. And it was a win-win situation. Gave underskilled inmates an opportunity to learn soft and hard skills, to learn the discipline of work, to learn skills that would allow them to survive on the outside and maybe have a better chance of escaping a criminal lifestyle. And also gave the federal government much-needed equipment at a reduced price. Do you know what's happened to the CORCAN program, Mr. Speaker? It's been reduced. And I'm not saying that rhetorically. If you go to Kent Institution, 90 kilometers outside of Vancouver, you can walk into the CORCAN rooms, which are like 3 big rooms that look like big industrial arts labs from our junior and senior high schools. And you know what you'll find in there? Storage. They're empty. This government has closed prison farms. We've had big debates. I don't intend on opening up that debate again. But we had prison farms operating at 4 or 5 institutions in this country that were absolute models of success, that gave offenders chances to learn those soft skills, to get up in the morning, to show up for work. They had responsibilities. The arguments I heard in this House were absurd about the closing of that. Well, these people are never going to find work on a farm. That's not the point of the prison farms. The point of the prison farms is to teach the skills of responsibility, of working together, of having to show up at the same time every day, to work with animals, to have often hardened people be able to emotionally reconnect and consider the feelings of other people, to learn responsibility. Very effective programs, and this government closed those farms. Now, you know, this bill is called the Safe Streets and Communities Act. I think it's more aptly called the Overcrowded Prisons, No Crime Prevention, and Overburdened Taxpayers with No Results Act. That, I think, is just as an accurate a title as any other. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the pieces of Bill C-10 Part of this bill, it's again part of this practice of governing that this party has, the Conservative Party has proven a predilection for, which is to take a whole bunch of unrelated bills and throw them together, and throw them in one great big conglomeration before this House, which is, I think, a very imprecise and ineffective way to govern, because we have to then disentangle all of the pieces, some of which are good, some of which are bad. I want to focus on some of the pieces of this. I want to talk about the international transfer of offenders provision of this bill. For many years, Canada has had a provision where Canadians who are convicted abroad have the opportunity to apply to serve their sentence in Canada. And this isn't done just because they want to. The host jurisdiction must agree, Canada must agree, and the offender must agree. And there are criteria. And the criteria are they have to satisfy the Canadian authorities that they are not able to access proper rehabilitation services in the country of origin, sometimes because there's no English spoken or French, sometimes because they don't have any rehabilitation programs, and sometimes because if there's particularly compelling humanitarian and compassionate grounds. We all remember the case, actually, it was the fellow convicted with Conrad Black, his compatriot, that successfully applied and came back to Canada. But there's another important reason why this act is important for public safety, and that is if that person, say the Canadian in the United States, finishes their sentence, the second after their sentence is completed, they get deported back to Canada. They come into our country. We have no record of them coming. We have no probation. We have no parole. We don't even know that they're in our community. If the person is actually transferred back to Canada, however, and serves their sentence in Canada, we have a record of their sentence. We often will have parole conditions so that when they're released from jail, we can impose conditions on them and monitor their re-entry into Canadian society. So it's actually better for public safety, community safety, to have this program. This bill essentially gets that program, and it allows the minister to have virtually unparalleled discretion to refuse such a request without any real kind of review. And that's not good. That's not good legislation, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk briefly about the pardon system. The New Democrats, not this last June, the one before, worked with this government to toughen our pardon system. We're the ones who proposed that we gave the National Parole Board the power to deny a pardon in any case in which the administration of justice would be brought into disrepute. We added the provision that someone convicted of manslaughter would be prohibited from obtaining a pardon for 10 years, where it was 5 years before. Those are the provisions that would prevent Carla Malka from getting a pardon, which under this government's watch was going to happen unless we did something. And the New Democrats worked with the government to make sure that didn't happen. This government now has come forward with further pardon provisions that are simply unjustifiable. They want to deny the ability of anybody with more than 3 convictions from ever in their entire life qualifying for a pardon. Now, we heard evidence before our Public Safety Committee from people in that situation, people who had 4 convictions or 10. We heard from one who had 26 convictions, and it sounded really bad. The person with 26 convictions, I'll tell you, the story's instructive. He was a young executive who was recently married, bought a house, and his wife got leukemia and died. He went into depression, and he started selling steroids for 6 months. And over the course of those 6 months, he engaged in selling steroids over the internet. When he was convicted, he pled guilty, and for every 1 transaction that he sold steroids, he had multiple convictions. Possession, of trafficking, and they were offensive because it was across the border. He's now an executive with Chorus Media, and came and appeared before a committee as a bright, rehabilitated, productive member of our society. And this is the kind of person who would be prevented from getting a pardon under this legislation. You know, the 3 strikes and you're out approach that has been prevalent in places like California, those jurisdictions are repealing those provisions because they're finding that it's putting a straitjacket on our justice system that is not effective, and it does not result in better community safety. It's expensive and doesn't result in better community safety. And that's why the New Democrats are opposed to this, because we want to create effective, strong, rational, fact-based policy that will likely result in safer communities, which, as I said at the beginning of my speech, is the goal of everybody in this House. So I would urge the government to listen to what the experts say, listen to what people across the justice system have to say, and not pursue a blind ideological approach because it may be good wedge politics, but to actually work together with all members of this House to craft good policy to make our community and our country safer for everyone.